Good evening. I'd like to call to order the regular town council meeting for Tuesday, September 13th, 2022. Please rise for a moment of silence. Let the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Allenson?
Here.
Carmody?
Hi, this is Sam calling in from sunny California. I'm here.
Fishbein?
Here from Wallingford.
Laughlin?
Here.
Marone?
Here.
Tata?
Here.
Testa? Zandri?
Here.
Chairman Cervoni?
Here. Mayor, would you like to take over?
Well, it's a pleasure to announce, and as you can see, we have some very important people in this auditorium tonight. These are none other than members of the Wallingford U10 Little League Girls Softball team who played 9 games, won them all, and are state champions. Is it? Yes. As we can see, these are very talented young ladies who have a great coach, families, but also a great coach. And Carl Tatro is here, and I'm going to ask him to come forward and say a few words on behalf of this team. Carl.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Council people, folks, thank you for having us. Tom, thank you again for the invite. Just want to thank everyone for their support. Certainly a lot of people to thank. Christine's here, our league president, so thank you very much for your support. All the parents, obviously there's a lot that goes into it, and I tried to warn some of you, and you didn't listen, and you stuck around. We had an awesome accomplishment. So I want to thank the young man in the front row there with the camera for following us around. This is my second time here, and this is twice now that you have been with us every step of the way, providing awesome memories to these families. So, Mr. Ross, thank you very much. Just the last 2 groups I want to thank, obviously, are my coaches. So, Sherry and Sarah, just two, I can't say the word I want to use right now, but just 2 awesome women who are not only great coaches and great people, but great role models for our players, and that's what it's about in our league. So from the bottom of my heart, love you both so much, and thank you for all you did. Tom Kappas isn't here, but thank Tom. Eric, I don't know where you are, but thank you. Thank you for everything you did. Scott, the Montanos. I'm sure I'm skipping someone, but forgive me, but just it takes a village, and we had an awesome group, and wouldn't be possible without all of you. Lastly, the players. Thank you for giving us as parents so much joy. We are all so proud of you. What you accomplished, can never be taken away, can never be forgotten. You all worked so hard. Everybody contributed something, and I know how proud I am of you and how much I care about you guys, and just want to thank you all for the effort you gave us and how much joy you gave us, and just really, really proud of you guys.
Indeed, it is a proud evening. Mr. Chair, Tom Laughlin was very instrumental in getting us all the names. Okay, Council Chair will come forward and assist me, and perhaps we have certificates here. if you could read the name, invite them up, and then if you, members of the team, just line up in front here so people can take a photo if they want to, okay, after you receive your certificate.
All right. Madison Gordills. Chelsea Montano. Aubrey Tatro. Lorelei Shunman. Savannah Hastings. Morgan Markowitz. Caitlin Hale. Briella Kristofalski. Kaylee Montano. Josie Chapin. Violet Schaefer. These two always end up getting paired up one way or the other. Sam Allison. Last but certainly not least, Anna Kappas. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Coach and parents. Thank you all very much. you for being here.
All right, thank you very much. And can we get a motion on the consent agenda, please?
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve or accept consent agenda items A through U.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Mr. Carmody. Any opposed? Hearing none, the consent agenda passes. Item 4, there are no items that were removed from the consent agenda. And the public question and answer period. Mr. Gross.
Good evening, Bob Gross, Long Hill Road. Through the chair to the mayor.
Yep, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, approximately 2 weeks ago on a Friday evening, the power went down on the east side of Wallingford. And it went down for a considerable amount of, a few hours total. But there was no way to find out why the power was out or how long it was going to be out. Is the town working on any way to be able to help us, town, know what's going on?
Well, typically, they are reluctant to put an estimate on time, depending
No.
upon the incident. And I don't have any details on the incident, but without knowing all those details, to try to put a time on it
That was
would be extremely difficult on their part.
That wasn't the question. The question was, what happened was a tree fell down, took down some power lines. So Woodhouse, Pond Hill, the Traditions, that type of area was out. They were out for a little over 3 hours. But the issue was how to find out. I have a mother-in-law who's 97, going to be 98 in a couple months, who's not mobile. And all we were looking to do was to see how long the power was going to be out, whether we had to get the generator powered up or whether we had to move her out of there. So we tried calling the electric division to no avail, not to their fault. The line was busy. And when we finally did get through, the guy said the phone's been ringing off the hook, which is understandable, because we did call the non-emergency police number, and they said to call the electric division. So we went to of course, to the web to see if there's anything out there, and the town has no presence on the web. Social media, where something could be posted at a moment's notice.
We have a website. We're not on social media, nor will we be. There's more misinformation on social media, and it gets worse all the time.
Is that-
It's not a place to look for anything of substance. We have a website with contact information. That's where people should go. We have emergency numbers to call. Certainly, the electric division has an emergency number.
Which we called,
Okay.
which took an hour to get through to.
But as I indicated, it is very difficult for them to estimate how long it will take.
Not asking them to estimate.
But that's what you just said. You wanted to know how long it would be out so
Want
you'd
to know
know
what the
when to
issue
put
was.
on a generator.
Want to know if the issue was an issue. They did, when we finally reached them, they estimated the time. That's all you're looking for, and that's what they can do. Is this why I noticed there was a fire department had a Facebook page? Is that why it's coming down? Are you the one behind?
I don't think our fire department has any Facebook page.
Okay.
Someone may have a site there that calls it the Wallingford Fire Department, but to my knowledge, we have no site. I know at one point there were 3 or 4 sites calling themselves the Recreation Department of the town of Wallingford, and none of them were the Recreation Department.
What?
The Police Department had 3 or 4 sites calling themselves Wallingford Police Department. None of them were the Wallingford Police Department.
So if we had a outage on whatever side of town or the complete town, the electric division, of course, is responsive, is very responsive to these issues. They get the crews right out there. But to have communication between the public in today's world, we're in 2022, I could pick up my phone right now and find out what's happening anywhere, pretty much anything in the world. And I can go to North Haven, I can go to Hamden if there's an issue going on, or any other town. Why is it just Wallingford, Mr. Mayor?
We have means of determining what is going on. I will check with the electric division with regard to the incident you're talking about. But we do. We've had years and years of outages, and we've come through them. People have been notified. I don't think this is anything new. No, there is not a place on social media to look for the information.
I don't, is it you that's not allowing it, or is it technically the police or fire or could the electric division, if they so desired, decide to put up a Facebook page tomorrow? Would you allow it? Or could they do it?
No, they can't.
Because you say no?
You cannot depend upon the sites on social media to give you accurate information. You should be contacting a .gov site. You know that comes from government. As you just mentioned, you know of sites that represent themselves as Town of Wallingford, and they're not. So which site do you believe? Go to a .gov site.
There is a way of verifying. You have a IT person on the council here. And I know you have hired the Board of Education. I assume the Town of Wallingford has IT people. There are ways of verifying and putting up secure sites for these types of things. It's just,
I'm not talking about a secure site. I'm talking about if you are going to other than a .gov site, there's a good possibility you are not talking to government. You're talking to someone masquerading as government. That's not good communication. I've related. West Haven had a post during the winter, and the post was that they weren't going to plow the streets. It was a storm of protest. It turned out it was not the city of West Haven speaking. It was a post that was not accurate and misled people. You can't control that. You can control if it's a .gov site.
Okay,
Mr. Gross,
I know my mind's going crazy listening to
you're
this.
well beyond your 3
Thank you.
minutes. Can we just see if there are any other takers? Anybody else like to speak? Ma'am, name and address for the record, please.
My name is Abigail Gilbert, formerly of 4 Doris Street, Wallingford, now of 88 Whitney Drive, Meriden. Good evening, council members. I listened to the council meeting on June 14th, where the settlement in our lawsuit against the town of Wallingford was approved. Several things stood out in that meeting. Members of the EDC were brought before the council and questioned at length for comments they had made that either implied or stated a negative intent by council members. It was clearly an egregious offense that the EDC should publicly speak in a manner that insinuated ill intent on the part of this council. Imagine then, if you will, how my husband and I were left to feel in 2018 after our meeting with the ZBA. I understand there are those who thought our bringing litigation against the town to somehow not be okay and actually wrong to do so. I want to be clear that CAIRO, the Commission on Human Rights and Opportunities, was forced to file the lawsuit by the town after the town withdrew from mediation. We adjourned that lawsuit at a later date. Our complaint was fully investigated by the Commission on Human Rights and Opportunities, and it was also substantiated both by HUD and the DOJ in 2018 and early 2019. I read the comments on Facebook after the article in the Record Journal. While most were kind and supportive, others were not so. Clearly, they had not read the court documents. We've held our peace, my husband and I, and we've not promoted a public spectacle of our case. However, after the media has asked several times for interviews and comments, we decided the proper form for a response was to you. You have the power to effect change that we cannot. While I will not engage in a full discussion of what occurred, it's there in the court records for anyone to review. I will bring to this council's attention some things that might prevent such a scenario in the future. For us, the lawsuit was not about money. We lost far more than we gained. It was about principle. Our rights and our liberties, they matter. Regarding the voting on the settlement, I was left to wonder how those who were on that ZBA board, who were named in the lawsuit and are now members of this council, vote it. Was there not an ethical reason to recuse or abstain from that vote? Per the settlement, the executed settlement agreement, the town will now require fair housing and ADA training of ZBA members. I was dismayed to hear the current ZBA chairman, who was also the chair in 2018, ask an applicant in the July 18th meeting about hardship after the applicant told the board clearly his application for a variance was based on accommodation. He wasn't only verbal in his request, he was presenting his application from a position in a wheelchair. The chairman actually said, and actually asked the man after his presentation, what is the hardship? Hardship goes to land. The ZBA meeting on July 18th, video timestamp 2207 if you want to look at it yourself. Well, ultimately, Mr. Moscato's application was approved. The demeanor of the board was something you should review. Clearly, the chairman still does not understand that a request for accommodation is a sole reason for a variance and an acceptable reason for a variance request. This lack of understanding creates a potential exposure. The town did not and does not have a review process for ZBA decisions. Perhaps accommodation request applications should require proper and full review by legal to evaluate if legal should be present to advise on such applications and to guide discussions and decisions to assure proper protections of PHI. That's personal health information for those who don't understand that. Or a path for such requests outside the public forum. In our case, because our needs were time is of the essence and the town had no review process to change the ZBA decision, mediation and litigation take years, we felt forced to leave our home and sell it. My home of 20 years, where I raised my kids. If the town had a process in place for review, perhaps all the costs of the last 4 years could have been avoided. During the mediation and litigation, I also noted that unlike real estate, where a broker must bring any and all settlement offers to the seller, the town's attorney only brought the offer that had been tentatively agreed to, not any settlement offers early on in the case that might have preserved both our ability to stay in our home and mitigated the town's exposure. The lack of settlement early definitively increased the legal costs associated for all parties. And if you didn't know this, in fair housing cases, the plaintiff only needs to prove one point of their case, and the defendant becomes responsible for all legal fees, all reasonable legal fees of the plaintiff.
Ma'am, I'm going to ask
Perhaps
you to-
this body should effect an ordinance or a charter change requiring any and all settlement offers be brought before it. Had ours been accepted in 2018, we'd still be in the home we loved and at far less cost, monetarily and emotionally. I'm sure some of you read the Record Journal article which summarized the complaint and recognized the manner in which we were treated. I go back to your June 14th meeting, where the offense you felt by the words of the EDC. Now consider all the article reported and how we were left to feel. The best part of small town living is community and the compassion and support offered in times of crisis and difficulty. This town has striven to create that sense of small town community, but if it lacks the compassion to care for its citizenry, it fails.
Ma'am.
This council seemed to be
you've well
blindsided by our
exceeded-
case.
Ma'am, you've well exceeded your 3-minute time period.
Can I please
Twice.
finish?
Well, I'm going to ask if there are other people who want to speak during the public question and answer period. Are there any other takers? Okay, you can go on.
Thank you, sir. This council seemed blindsided that our case even existed years into the lawsuit. How's that possible? There are changes that should take place. The ones we required in our settlement, and we did refuse to sign it, without those changes in training and policy, just scraped the surface. I love this town. I grew up here. I lived here most of my life. Actually, the longest I've ever lived outside of this town is since 2018. My heart is saddened that we were effectively pushed up. I hope this council will seriously review our case and effect the changes that will mitigate the town's exposures, but also mandate the compassion and protections for the people you represent. Thank you for allowing me to speak, and thank you for allowing me to extend my time. I do appreciate it. Good night.
Anyone else for the public question and answer period? There being none, I close. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Gross.
Bob Gross, Long Hill Road. Just, one last thing for the mayor on the, Eversource, and I assume the other utilities in the state, they have pages out there that have outages on their website. Mr. Mayor, do you think the town could do at least that?
As I stated, I will contact the electric division and find out what their processes and procedures are. They haven't changed anything. There's nothing new that I'm aware of. I will find out what they do, and maybe it can be improved, but that's the first step.
All right. And just one last quick question through the mayor, through the chair to the mayor. The trash energy plant had an issue last week, and it just reminded me, are you seeing any money from that trash energy plant? Excuse me, the transfer station? Is the town seeing any, besides taxes, are you seeing any revenue? Because that was kind of the deal when you transferred over to Covanta, that there was going to be revenue for the tonnage that came in there?
No, the contract with Covanta is gone. It was, we challenged it, and the contract was terminated, and payments were made to the towns. There's nothing other than taxes being paid.
When it became a transfer station, there was payments being paid.
Initially, there was an obligation to pay money. For the most part, it was not paid. It became a claim against Covanta, and ultimately that was disposed of and settled in the arbitration.
So you did receive money, but continuing on, you've received no money from that?
Other than taxes, we do not receive money.
Because, transfer stations, as a rule throughout the state, normally have some type of host or home rule. That's why Covanta agreed to do it in the beginning. It's weird that we don't get any money for that transfer station, considering, what happened there the other day. It is a pollutant.
No, initially, the transfer station was owned by Covanta. They sold it to Country,
Right.
the new owner.
But you had a contract on it, though, for a longer period of time.
If you'll let me speak, I can answer the question. The contract required payment of amounts per ton, and that was supposed to be paid by Country. For the most part, the terms of the contract were not followed by Country. We, the towns, the project, 5 towns, went to arbitration with Covanta for breach of contract, and the contract and its elements were disposed of in the decision of the arbitrator. Each town received money from that, and there is no longer any contract. It's a business like any other. The transfer station pays taxes, utility bills, must meet the general rules of our ordinances and local laws, but that is those are the terms of the existing arrangement.
Why were the other towns involved in the settlement with the transfer station when the transfer station was in Wallingford? We're the ones, meaning Wallingford was the party that was receiving the dollars, not the other communities. What would they have cared?
Who entered into the contract with Covanta?
Wallingford.
And 4 other towns.
To bring
It was a
tonnage
project.
in there. To bring tonnage there.
Look, if you're going to argue with the
No, I'm
facts, now is not the time for
All right,
it.
it's
I'm
just-
telling you, the contract with Covanta was a 5-town project.
It was.
And each town had claims. Some of the towns had claims because they were now forced to truck waste elsewhere other than to where it was supposed to go in Bristol. So there was a lot of fallout as a result of the sale of the transfer station, and ultimately it was resolved in arbitration.
Was it, just last, was it a public document? The settlement, the arbitration?
To my knowledge, it would be a
Thank you.
public document.
Anyone else for public question and answer? There being none, moving on to item 6. Can I get a motion to go into executive session to pursuant to Connecticut General Statute, Section 1-206B, regarding Attorney Roberts' legal opinion on the town council's distribution of ARPA funds?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Before you leave, I think we're going to retreat to the council office so you can stay in the comfortable seats. Oh, I'm sorry. We can't take Sam Carmody into the council office with us. So if you would let us have the chambers for executive session, thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
How sorry are you? Call the meeting back to order. Can I have a motion to come out of executive session?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Hearing none, I declare the council back in public session. On to item 7, which is our update on the new police headquarters from the Police Steering Committee. Good evening. Thank you for your patience this evening. Volunteering requires patience, right? If you could introduce yourselves for the record.
Allison Kapuscinski, Chair for the Police Station Steering Committee.
Brian Humes, representing Jakunski Humes Architects out of Berlin, Connecticut.
John Ventura, Police Chief.
So I have prepared a quick update for you all. Just a reminder, there's no action tonight. There's no formal request or anything, but just to kind of bring everybody up to speed, we've been very busy. So where I left you was with I believe, a March 2022 memo letting you know kind of that we've hired Jakunski Humes. We were out to bid at that point for a construction manager. Since then, we have hired Downs Construction Company. They definitely have an impressive resume. They've completed many police stations in the state of Connecticut, and they have worked with Jakunski Humes in the past. Most recently, I believe, in North Haven next door for their police department. So definitely feel like we have a really solid team working on this project. We are currently out to bid. I feel like we're always out to bid. This time for an owner's construction representative. If anybody's not familiar, that would be kind of the town's eyes and ears on the project site. So it would be a part-time, expectation out there. They would be doing the administrative work, processing payment voucher, or, like they make, the contractor will end up submitting for payment, and they'll be able to review that versus the work that was already done, and they'll be reporting back to the committee. So that will be a really helpful position to have. And then at that point, we'll really have our team put together. Overall, we are ahead of schedule by a few weeks. We have been, made aware pretty early on from Brian and his team that the state is contemplating a building code change, possibly as soon as October 1st. So once we were made aware of that, that would have possibly some implications when we go for a building permit. So we wanted to make sure that we're beating that deadline, and as of right now, we're looking to get our building permit plans in by September 21st, about then. So Brian has recently completed the 90% drawings and specifications for the building. So just about final design. Those drawings and specifications have gone to the construction manager for their review. They do a constructability review and also an updated estimate. So while Downs is working on that aspect, Brian is, of course, never sitting around waiting for his next turn. So he's been meeting with the police department to make sure that, all the assumed finishing touches on the drawings are correct. The cabinet layouts, there's a lot of really intricate, police equipment that's needed. So just making sure that with Brian's experience that his assumptions were right, and to nobody's surprise, I think they just about all were. But it was a very good meeting to kind of make sure we're all on the same page and ready to move forward for that 100% final design bid document. So today I did just get an updated schedule, which puts the bidding for all the trade packages occurring sometime in October, opening early November. So we're hoping that holds up. And we did just meet with the purchasing agent. We, as in myself and a representative from Downs Construction, met with the purchasing agent and the comptroller today, just to make sure we're on the same page. Every town does purchasing a little different, so make sure all the ordinances are going to be followed, and that was all squared away. So we feel very confident with that, staying on track. And then if all of this goes according to schedule with all of the bidding, we are hoping to be back in December. I believe you have one meeting on December 13th with our final request for a bond increase. So that's kind of what we're tracking, just to kind of lay out all the groundwork for what to expect in the coming months from this project. So with that, I'll get into the latest estimate. So this latest estimate is outdated a little bit. We are getting a new updated 90% estimate as soon as Friday. There's really been no pencils down time to come and update you all, so I apologize. You're kind of getting a little bit old information now, but it's the most current we have at the moment. This 50% cost estimate was done in June, and it came in at $25.5 million for the construction costs, with an additional expected $5 million in owner's soft costs. So if you're doing the math, that's a total of $30.5 million. We do expect that to come down, and I'll kind of get into that now. So out of that $30.5 million, $1 million has already been expended through Brian's designing and the construction manager as well. So, that includes some of the, what was already authorized under the bond. So that's already been taken care of. So, we did expect, of course, the cost to go up. Typically, year to year, you're looking at 3 to 4% inflation. I know everybody's favorite word, inflation, right now. So when the original estimate was done, it was kind of a back of napkin kind of what's this typically going to look like for per square foot unit cost for a police station this size. So that was done back in 2021 before we purchased the property. And since then, of course, we've developed the program, worked with the police department to make sure it's actually going to fit their needs. That estimate, was for spring 2021 construction, and we were never going to go to construction at that point. So you typically take about 4% a year, be roughly 8% by the time we'd be ready to go in spring of 2023. But to kind of put in the reality of the situation, we just got numbers back from the construction manager that the inflation was between October of 2021 through January 2022, 21% for non-residential construction. So, of course, we are not immune to that. We're going to see that in our numbers as well. We don't take it lightly, but it's the reality of the world that we're in at this point. We have, used this owner's space needs assessment as our backbone. That owner's space needs assessment was done very early on in the process, where before any plans were looked at, before we were looking at the layout of the proposed building, it was all about what does the chief need to have a functioning police department, not want, but what does he need? And those decisions were not taken lightly either. Very long meetings to make sure we're looking at it from every angle, and he obviously had to make some really thoughtful decisions and look out for the future of the police department. So he's also kept us in the loop all along as this program needs have changed. They've actually reduced a little bit. So for instance, ways that we're gonna hopefully bring that $30.5 million down, one aspect is the Firearms Training Center. So we were originally proposing a 30 by 30 room, which would serve as more like a virtual training room. The thought behind it, there's vendors that will be able to map out different school buildings and whatnot that you could put into that room, and then now you're training in that scenario without actually being at a school to train. So we have taken that out because Chief has looked into more of an Oculus type training device, and that could be used interior to the building in the defense tactics training area. So that's one area. So as much as it's a 30 by 30 room, that is absolutely building saving costs, and that building is set into the hillside with the retaining wall. So we're going to be saving some money there as well. And then finally, the vehicle storage building, we were proposing 4 bays where they're for large pieces of equipment or vehicles, basically, that are emergency response. So one of them was sold and is not going to be replaced. We were able to reduce that. Cuts the building down by 15 feet, and again, less retaining wall. So we're really hoping to see those numbers realized and that number come down in this final 90% estimate that we're expecting this week. Kind of another just tidbit, as you go through design, you have a design contingency. So in the beginning of design, you have a larger contingency. Now it's shrinking because there's less unknowns, right? More of the project is designed and all the details are, figured out. So we are hoping that that number comes down, and we look forward to seeing what we do get later this week. One last thing, the original estimate that we got, we did not think that we were going to need a communication tower there. We had some early conversations with the vendor, and all indications was that we would need some sort of antenna on the roof to communicate with the other systems in town. Unfortunately, now that they've looked into it more, we found out a few months ago that we are going to need a tower. So that's certainly not cheap and was not anticipated in the original estimates. So we have included that in our drawings, and we have very rough costs for that. Unfortunately, that's lagging behind in design. So, those costs is about a $400 million swing. They're estimating between $600,000 and $1 million for the radio communication equipment that goes on the tower, and then a little less than $400,000 for the tower itself. So we were not anticipating that early on, but that's where we are. Do you guys have anything to add?
Brian Humes, Jukunsky Humes Architects. I would note that we did go through the local land use approvals through the town. We did receive on August 9th the approvals from Planning and Zoning and also from the Inland Wetlands and Watercourse Commission. Both of those approvals were unanimous, so that process has been completed. So the remaining permit that we're looking for now through the construction manager would be a building permit. So the other permitting has been completed and approved.
Just to add, I mean, when we did the needs assessment, I think that we looked at this department and this agency moving forward. So you can't really plan out 5 years, you had to plan out 20 years, So what's the Wallingford Police Department going to look like in 20 years? So, I think that, we've spent countless hours kind of figuring that out, not what we need presently, but what we need in the future. But everything that we put into that design is needed. It's not anything that's extravagant. There's not a lot of wants. It's a needs-based assessment of what we have in there. The fact that this is taxpayer money is not, something that's held lightly by anyone in the police department. So when we went and made sure that we had what we want, we also kept in mind that, this is money from the town that we need to spend responsibly. So that's what the final product, I feel, represents for everyone. And that's how we designed it.
Thank you. So I see a big case over there.
Yes.
On your left. Is that going to stay closed, or are you going to share with us?
I do have schematic plans. If you're interested in wanting to know the plan arrangement or the site plan arrangements, I'm prepared to show you that.
I think it's probably beneficial, to those of us who haven't been to your monthly meetings.
Thank you. I guess first, for a shameless plug, I can show you just some experience that we have in doing police facilities. These two boards represent the police experience that I have throughout Connecticut and Massachusetts, planning and designing police facilities. So with this, I just wanted to represent that the reason we were brought on board was because of our experience in this building type. And we're bringing that experience to the town and to the department as to where we started the project, understanding the needs. I can tell you and reiterate what the chief did express, that with all our experience that we've seen in the region, this facility is really the needs that we see in other similar communities. There's nothing in here that's extravagant. There's a lot of different spaces, and these buildings tend to be higher dollars per square foot just because of the technology that's included, some of the detention and prisoner processing requirements. But we always design these facilities with officer safety as a priority. And we have to look not only for the safety of the officers, but the safety of the public coming to this facility, the safety of any detainees. And so we take these designs seriously, and we have to give you what other communities are also looking for and asking for. And it really is nothing more. The site, when we were first brought on board, the site at 100 Barnes Road, we were the ones that evaluated that building prior to the purchase. We were the ones that recommended to the town that you purchase this building. And I can tell you tonight emphatically that this building serves the needs of the department beautifully. It was a wise decision, and it's going to prove to be a suitable solution, not only for today, but tomorrow and tomorrow's tomorrow. But in order to take the existing building, which is in red, we do have to do some additions and slight modifications. We are bringing a new front entrance so people can identify the entrance coming off of Barnes Road. There are currently 2 curb cuts off of Barnes Road. Barnes Road is going north and south on this plan. But there's a curb cut which will be designed for public entrance and public access, and this would provide public parking, handicapped accessible parking, electric vehicle charging stations. It's also used for internet exchange areas. It will be lit at all times of the night, so people can use this facility for just not even getting out of their car, but needing to exchange people or things or products. They come to this location for that secure location. It is going to have video surveillance. The other curb cut would be restricted access. We're going to have control gates there for only fleet vehicles and staff vehicles to enter the site from the other curb cut. And everything to the top part of the plan would be for fleet vehicles and staff vehicles, separated off from the public parking to the lower section. But to make this more of a public entrance and public experience, if you're familiar with the building, the front entrance is not that identifiable. So we do want to bring more emphasis to the front with signage, with entrance, with lighting, with signage. We're moving the road sign that's on the road, we're moving it down to the public entrance area. So we can make this identifiable, flag poles. The public would know that that's the public entrance to the facility. So in addition to a small addition for the public entrance, we also are adding an addition to the left side of the building for a sally port. A sally port is just a secure garage for police to utilize to bring in prisoners, close the garage doors, and safely transport them from the vehicles into the building. They can also use these bays for processing vehicles for evidence. They can then bring these items, large items, into the building, close the doors, properly process these items out of the elements, or secure it for later investigative needs. So there are 3 bays that are going to be added for that sally port function and processing. We have 2 other blue squares that are to the top of the plan. Those are 2 outbuildings. One of them is for the use of the Firearms Training Center, which would have a 5-lane active live fire range. And we also have another building which is for traffic maintenance and vehicle storage. Traffic maintenance is a function of the police department where they have traffic signs, traffic cones, traffic maintenance. That includes materials, that also includes vehicles. So that's why that's going to be out in the outbuilding. Both of these outbuildings are going to be constructed into an existing slope where the site slopes up to the neighbors, to the top of the plan. So there's a slope on this site. Both of these buildings would be pushed into the slope. The reason why we're doing that is to cut down the height on these buildings from the perimeters, and also for the Firearms Training Center to help with the acoustics of the building. Obviously, burying that back of the building into the berm would assist in acoustics, and we feel very confident that the acoustics from that building would be contained, the firearms noise would be contained within the building. We have some mechanical noise that we also have to abate from the exterior of the building, but we're not anticipating any noise concerns from this building. We've done these within neighborhoods, within residential neighborhoods, where we were able to contain the noise through proper acoustic controls for the Firearms Center. There's also a small impound area to the upper left on the plan. This is for impounded vehicles or anything that has to be stored on the site that's in the process of investigative or need to retain onto the site. Fleet vehicles would be parked primarily in the front row of the staff parking area, fleet vehicle parking area, and we're providing a canopy parking for 30 vehicles along that area. So when they do shift change, they would be able to bring fleet vehicles under the carport and then safely, again, transfer from the cars into the building and back out again. Those 30 cars carport is designed for future electric vehicle charging stations also. So that's trying to think into the future for Wallingford and being sustainable with the carport. The carport can have solar panels put on the top of the carport to assist in that electric vehicle charging. So that's another feature that we have within the cost estimate and within the plan development. This is the plan as it currently exists. So if you were to walk in the building today, it's a very open plan. There's not a lot of partitions in the middle of the plan. It is ringed with small offices to the perimeter of the plan. This triangle space has been developed for some computer data and small area of restrooms, and then this is a very constricted, confined entryway into the building. But there's nothing in this building that's really going to take a lot of effort to remove. It's not a lot that's in there. We're using the exterior walls. We have to insulate those exterior walls to bring it up to a newer energy code. We're adding insulation not only to the walls, we're adding insulation to the ceilings. We're improving the thermal envelope of the building. That gives you lower energy costs over time. And while you're not going to be able to identify each room within the plan, all of the space within this building is being utilized. So there's nothing on this plan that's actually identified as any future expansion, future build out. All of the space that's available here, about 45,000 square feet, is all going to be built out for different functions. I'll do it in colors. All of the yellow spaces would have public access or some amount of public accommodation. So that would include a vestibule, a public lobby. They'd have emergency operations center, a training classroom, interview rooms, permitting is all done in that yellow area so that police, in addition to police training, can host training, have outside agencies come in, can host community events, and have access right off the lobby in all of the spaces that are yellow. And typically, if you go to the police department, this is about all you're going to see of the department is the area in yellow. Because everything beyond the yellow would be restricted access, official use only. We'll go to red. The red area is dispatch. We are bringing dispatch from the Main Street location and bringing dispatch over to 100 Barnes Road. So we have dispatching, dispatch supervisor, toilet facilities, kitchen facilities for just dedicated for the dispatch area. All of the darker blue are all the different divisions within the police department. Administrative division, detective division, community input, community impact, traffic division, professional standards, training. Those are all offices that are in the darker blue. Those are running around the perimeter. All of that has the exterior glass, access, natural light. The lighter blue. The lighter blue is the highly used and very needed patrol functions. That's where the majority of the patrol department would have access to locker rooms, kitchen facilities, day rooms, roll call rooms, report writing, sergeant's offices, lieutenant's offices, physical fitness areas. All those are the lighter blue. The orange. The orange area is in a number of different locations throughout the building because orange all is for evidence storage, evidence processing. Evidence comes in different sizes, different dimensions, different needs. So we have regular forensics evidence storage. We have vehicle processing and vehicle storage, which I talked about off of Sallyport Edition. We also have areas of bulk storage. The building has a loading dock. We can utilize that loading dock to bring items in, large items for bulk and bulk storage. These are items that the police department is obligated to continue to store some of it forever. So we need the space. It accumulates. They can purge certain items at certain times, but it has to do with firearms. It has to do with narcotics. It has to do with valuables. It has to do with everything they're bringing in to assist them in a investigation. So all of this has to be cataloged, and it has to all be done according to accreditation standards. So we've met all of the accreditation standards, not just for evidence, but for prisoner processing and holding. And the last is the green. The green area is your prisoner processing, prisoner intake, detention cells, holding, and actually it's prisoner release and bonding when somebody's not just taken in, but if somebody is then released back to the public. That whole process has to be done in a very controlled, very safe manner with materials that are durable and safe and secure. So other than that, we have some purple areas which are scattered around toilet rooms and custodial, but that really rounds out all of the different functions that they have to do with certain adjacencies. The vehicle storage and traffic maintenance, this was the original schematic design. As Allison mentioned earlier, we have now reduced this by one entire bay. So it was a larger facility in the schematic design. It's now been reduced by this right bay, so it's a smaller building. And the training center for firearms, we have a 5-lane range, 25 yards for certification purposes. This is the 30 by 30 room that we originally had in the design. Now this room has been eliminated, and this wall is now brought in as this is the exterior wall here. It's a really functional building. It's just for firearms and firearms certification and firearms training. A quick sketch of the front entrance. We talked about redoing the front entrance, making it identifiable. We're going to raise the elevation of the building in that area. It's a very low building. Grade comes up to make the building perceived to be even lower than it really is. We're going to have an aluminum canopy that comes out and protects the front entrance. The front entrance would be aluminum automatic opening doors, similar to that you see in a supermarket or a grocery store where automatic doors would be opening for accessibility. But it's going to be flanked by 2 piers on either side. And the design of these piers is not a direct replica, but it's a nod to the armory. Those piers, if you look at the front armory on Main Street, those brick piers with the articulation and the precast caps and the base on those really come back to the design of coming from the armory and now moving the station over to Barnes Road. Any questions? That was about 8 months worth in about 20 minutes.
Yes. Counselor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone. Chief, I heard Allison talk about wants and needs and that kind of stuff, and I'm a little concerned about the 30-30 room. So you originally anticipated having some sort of simulation training in there for school situations, but are now have assented to some sort of virtual reality device? Is that?
So if you really look at it, we have used the Secret Service has provided us with some sort of, basically it's for better, lack of a better term, it's like referencing laser tag, right? So you have some video or scenario that goes up on the screen, and you have a firearm that's a replica of what you have with a laser on it, and you're able to engage a threat target based on what presents itself to you, run off a computer. So that's kind of that situation that room was designed for. But since that room has been designed, I've been in contact with a couple companies that run a virtual training an Oculus system. So in 2 weeks, I have Axons coming to the police department with their system to try out. From all accounts and talking to people from different agencies, that this is cutting edge training. A lot of different scenarios can be run through it. threat, lethal, non-lethal scenarios that present the officer. And you could do it in a relatively smaller area with more tools. So we're going to try that out in 2 weeks, but I'm pretty confident that that can accomplish exactly what we wanted the original space to do in a little more advanced technology.
So when we plan for 20 years, you're confident that 20 years from now, you won't need something like this?
I think a lot of the training that we're going to do is going to require less hands-on and a lot more of this kind of thing. I mean, if you even see some of the things that we do now, like the classroom setting that we have, grown accustomed to for a lot of the training is gone. It's a lot of one-on-one, computer training. So I am confident that taking away just that space, which was only going to be designed for that specific purpose, is okay for us, because I think that there's other means that we can utilize.
And then the 15 feet, I don't recall that in the drawings, but what are we losing by losing 15 feet off the building?
So if you remember, we had purchased, I would say probably 10 or 15 years ago, that truck-trailer combination, which we used for negotiations. So, we found in using that trailer that, A, it's very hard to maneuver. There's not a lot of officers that are qualified to drive it, and getting it to a scene relatively fast is challenging. So we sold that trailer to the electric division that can utilize it, I think, a lot better for their emergency needs, and we're going to try to downsize into something smaller, similar to an ambulance style to run operations out of. So really that bay that we designed for that is not needed.
So now that you've already gotten the land use approvals, do you need to go back and get reapproved, or is that an administrative approval?
I believe it'd be administratively, since we're reducing the impacts.
And then I heard about the accreditation standards. Are we talking about design standards, or are we talking about, CALIA and POST, and
So
this building would allow for you to meet the accreditation standards?
correct. So when we've been Tier 3 accredited now for some time. We've actually just been recertified Tier 3 last year. So everything in that building represents what's required through the state of Connecticut to maintain that Tier 3. And I think that, especially with the evidence collection and the booking area, it allows us to do so without having to make any modifications. I think moving forward in the current building that we're in on North Main Street, we would have to, greatly alter some of the things in that building to maintain some of the Tier 3 accreditation standards moving forward. But the way that we designed this building in mind was to adhere to all those Tier 3 standards and not have to worry about, altering the building in any means moving forward.
And then because, I do this stuff, which standard are we meeting, CALIA or POST?
We're meeting post Tier 3.
Okay. All right, thank you. That's all I got.
Councilor Zandri?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. I just have a couple of quick questions. At one point during the discussion, you were talking about designing this for, where does the division need to go for the next 20 years? So, and it sounds like we're using up almost the entire footprint of what we're building into. So when we look at a 20-year projection, where do we feel we might be at that, 18, 19, 20-year mark on capacity, growth, and those types of items?
So, if you look at, just take, for example, the detective division, right? So if you kind of look at what we're dealing with in that kind of spectrum, we're dealing with a lot of financial crimes, a lot of internet crimes, and I think that that's going to progress through the future. So the manner in which we design that detective division will allow us to do a lot more computer-based investigations. There are cutouts in there that would allow us to, do some of the more complex computer investigations. And I think that as you kind of look at the plans, that we've allowed for that growth of the change of the spectrum of what we're dealing with now. So the kind of crimes that we're dealing with now are going to change in 20 years, and the building allows you to do that. And I think just the example of the detective division, planning for the future, the space in there, there's room for 15 workstations in there, but it was done so with the anticipation that in 20 years, a lot more is going to be done on the investigation side, and maybe you're not going to get that initial responding officer dealing with some of the, the cases that we do now. So we kind of plan that in the, into the plans, but also in the patrol division, it allows them for more, usage of, evidence, and we also have places that they can, practice some processing skills that won't maintain, a lot of the time of the detective division. So a lot of the things that we did plan in here is for the future and, also can be used in the present. So, 15 detectives is not what we have right now, but in the future, it probably is something that's realistic.
So if we went back 20 years, do we happen to know the size of the police force 20 years ago as opposed to today? Just spitballing if you had a guess.
No. We did go back 20 years, and we have statistics for 20 years ago. We have statistics going back for calls for service, for fleet inventory, but also for police personnel. And in 1980, the department was 59 total sworn. In 1990, it was 73. In 2008, it was 75. The building is being projected out for a future potential of 95. So it would be a growth from 59 to 95 over 50 years.
And are you comfortable with that assessment that, and obviously a lot of this is speculation, you don't know how Wallingford is going to grow and change, but I mean, do you especially, you've got all this expertise with these other divisions that you've built. Mm-hmm. Do you feel comfortable that in 20 years that we're not going to be, I don't want to overemphasize like bursting at the seams, but we won't have a capacity problem if there's a change in the number of female officers that are there, that we've got room to swing? Are we comfortable that we've got good estimates starting today and going forward?
I'm very confident. Not only do you have a 20-year growth potential factored into all of the spaces within the department, but if that growth does happen in the 20 years, the building still is designed for that number. There's no overcrowding occurring within that growth period. So if that growth period doesn't happen in 20 years, it happens in 50 years, the building would still be satisfying the design intent for the department. So I see this building as the last police department that Wallingford's going to have to build. Wallingford only has so much geographical area, and it has a future build-out of 56,000 people. You don't have 56,000 people in Wallingford, and growth of Wallingford is not the only component for police expansion, because all crime doesn't just come from within Wallingford's geographical area. So you're impacted by the region, you're impacted by a lot of things happening with your neighboring towns. That brings crime to your community. But the growth that we have looked at and built into this, I think it's more of a 50-year growth potential for what we're experiencing for Wallingford. So I'm very confident that a 20-year growth is probably a conservative estimate on what we've planned for this facility, and I would say it's more of a 50-year growth.
Fantastic. It sounds like a lot of thought went into that, and I appreciate that very much. I have one side question, probably for the chief. So with all the discussion about eventually moving over to Barnes, I've got my own personal opinions about this, but I'm really reflecting more on some of the input that I'm getting from residents. There is some mindset of, gee, I like having a police station downtown. So in consideration of that thought process, is there any consideration being given of like I don't know what you would call it, a storefront or a satellite office in the center of town that people could go to for smaller items before they may have to go all the way out to Barnes Park to do business of a, I guess, non-critical nature? Has that been given into any of this consideration for the planning?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, if you really look at the current building now, whoever may be the next tenant of that building, if it is a town, entity, I think that we can keep a space in there for the police department where we can run certain units out of there, such as, the bike unit or something, similar to that, where, right now our lieutenants during the daytime love doing a walking beat down the center of town. So, I think that, there's nothing that prevents us from doing that. But an established area that we can dispatch out of, I think that's, it's up for discussion. But if we can make it work, I'm not adverse to that whatsoever.
That's good, because again, I think there's some cross-section of folks in town that they just like knowing the police are uptown. I like knowing that they're everywhere, but I mean, but the idea is, you know, I understand the mindset, and so I'm glad to hear for those, you know, foot patrols, the bike patrols, we're going to keep some elements of that central and still have like an identity there somewhere in the center of town. So I appreciate the thought process behind that as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I had.
Councilor Tata.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. I just want to speak about the numbers for a moment. So it looks like the total now that we're up to is 30.5 million. Does that include our purchase price that we paid for the property, or is that in addition to the 30 million?
So the 30.5 does not include the $1.76 million purchase price.
Okay.
It does include the services for architectural and design services.
Okay. So you said 1.76 was the purchase price of the property?
I believe so. Okay. That'd be random if I remembered that and it wasn't correct.
Okay. No, I
I
won't
hope.
hold you to it, but okay. The 30.5 million, I'm assuming that does not include any bonding. So basically any interest, correct? That would be the project cost without the interest.
I think you're correct. There is part of the owner's soft cost is bonding costs as administrative costs, but not the interest though.
Okay. Do we know how much, or how long we would bond it for, or at current bonding rates? The comptroller's not here tonight, so I know it's.
I'm not sure. I will absolutely, get a better picture of that for when we come for approvals.
Okay.
For sure.
And I'm asking only because I'd like to look at the full, complete cost. I know, for example, with the pool, I think it was 7 million and it ended up being about 9 million when you include the interest. So I'm assuming that, this is going to add, I would assume at least another 5 million if we're bonding, which we are. So I'm going to assume that we're at about 35 million, but again, that's not going to be 100% accurate until we get those bonding numbers. So my concern, obviously, is the cost. And not just the cost, the fact that we're doing this when we know we're in the middle of inflation and how high everything is. We've held off on other projects for the same reason. And as Councilor Zandri said, I've also, just over the months this has been going on since we purchased it, talking to people, and I have not talked to one person who likes the location. Obviously, I haven't talked to the whole town, but I'm very concerned with making the taxpayers spend this kind of money for something that they're not really supportive of. So, the design looks good, but again, I think we're going to be at about $35 million, and I believe originally the number we were given was 18 million. That's the number that stands out in my head. Now we're up to 30 million. 35 if we include the bonding. And again, I'm saying 35. That's me speculating. But this is a major, major cost, and we're doing it at a time when we know it's the most expensive time we could possibly be doing it. So again, it's just the design looks good to me, but the pricing is a major concern for me right now. Thank you.
Councilor Zandri.
So, Councilor Tata, I can help you out spitballing a couple of numbers if you'd like it. So, based on the bond rate from the last time we had a conversation with Mr. Sen about when we were talking about the pool and how our rates went up from about the 2% range, and we're approaching 4 right now. So I'm using a factor of interest of 3.75 over 20 years. $30 million once complete payments over 20 years would be a total amount of $42,687,000. So the interest amount on that would be $12,687,000. So the payments round out over a 20-year period of basically about $2.1 million each year. So if that helps you at all, that's where we sit based on bonding $30 million.
Thank you. It helps in the sense that we know the numbers, but it doesn't help with the concern over the cost, obviously.
And I'll add that we have yet to see more Fed tightening, So I'm expecting those three-quarter point, so 0.75 that's coming to impact that further.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, just one more,
Sure.
is there any type of government matching or grant programs or anything that we can try to get for this? I know like when the schools do, buildings, sometimes there's state grants. Is there anything for this?
Not that I know of. Brian, do you know of any?
No, not for municipal police facilities. There's no state reimbursement grants or programs that are in place for these. These are all locally funded projects throughout the state.
Great, thank you.
There's some steep grant, but they're small numbers.
Yeah, and I know that I have, every time I get a grant opportunity, I do look at it, even if it could be a small portion of the project covered by it, but I haven't seen anything yet, so, but of course I'll keep an eye out for that.
Of course, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Fishbein?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So before I was first up here, I think Councilor, now Chairman Cervoni, and I came in together. About 3 months before we got sworn in, we were here for a presentation about how the police department needed to be replaced. And that's what, we're 14 years or something like that later, or something like that. So I think it's inevitable that it happens. I will say I have been and remain in. I like the location. So if anybody's wondering about that, the numbers are a concern. But when we look at, you said 21% inflation. That I think, looking at my numbers, is on top of the initially projected 4%. So, because I think we were dealing with about 21 million at the time of the presentation, if I recall correctly. So now we're about a third on top, which is, that's a significant number more. But we are planning for 20 years and hopefully into the future. And this has got to get done so that we can maintain our certification. So, if our department doesn't have the certification, then we have issues with the state. And certainly we want our public to be confident that we have well-trained, good officers. And I think this is the only way we get there. So this is one of those things that I think we need to spend the money on. I have faith, but then, the question is, why was the 30 by 30 room contemplated to begin with if we had this alternative that was sufficient? So I'm hopeful that we're not just cutting things out of this, for the sake of getting a lower number also. So I'm certainly on board in favor with what I've seen, and I thank the committee for all the work that it's done. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So I do want to, before I forget, acknowledge the other two members of the committee who are here with us tonight. Mr. Walworth, sitting in the front row, and committee member, our recent Chief of Police, Bill Wright, is also sitting near the front row. And I've been part of this committee since its inception. And I can tell you that every expense reduction, expansion, contraction that we've talked about has been an extensive discussion about the needs of the police department to appropriately serve the community. Every committee member has brought experience. We also have retired Fire Chief Rich Heidgard on the committee, and he has experience with buildings for the fire department. So there's a good variety of experience on this committee. No expense is taken at all lightly. We had extensive discussions about when electric police vehicles are really going to become part of the norm. And so while we've got provision in there for the future of electric vehicles, we're not fully fleshing it out yet because, it seems that, just to talk about one particular expense, it's going to be a long time before there's an electric vehicle that can serve 3 8-hour shifts every day with sufficient charging time, especially with the volume of electrical equipment that the vehicle has to run, the computer resources and the like, and communication. So lots of discussions have been resulted in good decisions to bring us where we are today. Councilor Testa.
Thank you. I like what I see, as I'm sure everybody feels, the cost is bad news, but that's the economy we're in right now. I'm hopeful that, we might turn the corner a little bit in the construction industry soon enough that maybe these numbers get a little bit better when you proceed. I like the plan, I'm in favor of everything, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask this. Regarding vehicle storage, is there, do we have any existing alternatives for anything, given like the space you have now? Is there anything in the property, or is there any way we could potentially maintain some type of storage on the existing site or in our existing properties that could reduce the need for a building? And if the answer is no, then that's cool.
Well, the thing with that building that we have now, so there's a sign shop in there, so we're responsible for all signage in this, the town of Wallingford. So we have an individual that goes in there and he replaces, stop signs and street signs and all that. So that his shop is in there, and actually, if you, by all means come and look at it, that shop is too small for him right now because there's so much work. But, also in addition to that, the vehicles that are in there are emergency vehicles. So if we had a critical incident that we needed to dispatch immediately, I think it would be hard to go from Barnes Road to North Main Street to get the vehicles than to go out to the scene.
Okay.
So I would say that might not be feasible.
Well, that's why I asked, to know that answer. I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm all set.
Anyone else on the council? Any questions or comments from the public? There being none, I want to thank you all for your presentation. I do enjoy working with you on this project.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, can I just ask, is there a possibility we could get this stuff emailed to us? We'd have hard copies that we could look at?
Sure.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you again for your presentation. There being no further business on the agenda, a motion to adjourn is in order.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? There being none, I declare this meeting adjourned.